All right. Good morning, dude and dudettes. Everybody knows. One take. All right. 5.7. Okay. Industrialization and economic developments. All right. So we're basically talking about now what is the end result of these economic liberalization policies, right? And in this international globalist society, and the ending result is that rapid industrialization, this fast moving industrialization, this very quick change, right? Again, remember, we're not focusing on the past 2 years, we're focusing back on 200 years, right? Over the past 200 years, we have went from no cars, no planes, no internet, no nothing, to now having literal pocket computers and AI. That is an insane change, and it's really hard to grasp in our head how fast we're moving. The way to put it in perspective is the plane, right? We went from essentially not being able to fly a plane in the early 1900s to going like breaking the sound barrier within like 50 years, right? It moves fast, and in the moment we don't think it's moving as fast as it is, but when we look back, it moves really, really quickly. So what ends up happening is that we have noticed now, of those 200-year perspective, we have seen that we are dependent on fossil fuel energy. It is incredibly difficult for us to function without fossil fuel energy, and that led to a lot of problems, whether that be pollution, whether that be unsafe water, whether that be massive amount of death by just cars going too fast, too big, too not safety, enough safety features, whatever, right? There has been a lot of negatives economically, environmentally, and politically from this fast industrialization and liberalization, right? So a lot of times we're focusing now on these wide changes that are very hard to change. Obviously, we all know the fossil fuel industry is not too great for us, right? Try to convince Dorito Dum Dum Man if he believes that, but we all know it's bad. Like, you can ask any scientist, you can do any amount of research. It's not the big government trying to manipulate you. It is that it's just true, and we saw that fact, right? When we came out and realized that there is a certain chemical inside, I think, in hairspray, it was creating a hole in the ozone. Once we got rid of that chemical, guess what happened to the ozone? There's no more hole, right? The hole is kind of minimized and or disappeared. I haven't looked recently, so maybe it's completely gone. So the overall idea is that there's some commonalities that we've seen in these past 10, 15 years, is that you physically move those factories away from urban areas. There's actually a fun little history tidbit. London was known as the smelly city for a long time because their industries in the 18 and 1700s were in London. So you couldn't breathe the air. You basically were walking down the street and there's just poop on the ground. Every single historical movie of like the 17, 16, 1800s, the one thing that they got wrong was just the amount of poop that was just on the ground at all times. Horses, people, pigs, whatever. It was just disgusting because all of the industry was where everyone lived. That made it really easy and productive because the workers had to walk 10 minutes and now you're at work. The problem was the overall health of the people was horrific. So we've seen moving those industries away from big cities. The next thing is we start to see a implement of green technology. Obviously, there's been a very, very, very rapid and intense change inside of this scenario, right? 5 years ago, EVs really didn't exist, and if they did, they were kind of bad, right? You had like the original Prius, which was the hybrid, and everyone made fun of it. Nowadays, you have everyone trying to drive a Tesla or drive a BYD. That is because we've seen these green technologies becoming better. Obviously, there's still some problems with that, like rare earth minerals. We might not have enough cobalt for all of the batteries, or lithium. We might not have enough. But overall, the idea is trying to understand that we don't have to have these bad fossil fuels, right? And there's other options. So politically, what they can do is be passing laws and having subsidies for EVs, which is very, very common. A country like France was trying to get rid of all gas-powered cars and gave massive subsidies to EVs or very small-engined hybrid cars. As well as you can see that a big push is just to clear up air quality. Bangkok, Thailand specifically, had a huge resurgence in this push, and now the air quality has been fantastic comparative to what it was 3-4 years ago. Overall, what we're seeing is that they're trying to develop a infrastructure that is leaning more towards the general health of the public rather than the industrialization and economic development. Whether that be pushing the industries far enough away to where you just don't see the bad, right? I think that that's the most common that people don't realize, is that if you just kind of go 2 hours outside of a major city, you will see the grossness of the areas, right? So in China, about 2-3 hours north, I think north of Beijing, is Tianjin. And that is just that's basically the industrial city of Beijing, right? If you want to get anything built in Beijing, it's actually not built in Beijing, it's built in Tianjin. That is pretty common for most big cities in the world, is that they have the big city, and then about a few hours away surrounding it is the industrial area, because that minimizes the grossness, right? The other thing is the green technologies. Surprisingly, China is kind of leading the world in this right now. They're doing really well in solar and wind. They're starting hydro. There's this big push against hydro because it actually can kind of really damage the water sources and the downstream, right? Laos is having some difficulties. Cambodia is having some difficulties due to hydro electric dams are kind of minimizing the water coming in. But again, that's a chicken and the egg. It's, do we have the damage of the environment from hydro, or do we have the damage from the environment from coal and gas? And you gotta just 6-7, so stupid. Generally speaking, what we're trying to get here is that we're trying to understand that politics needs to respond to the health crises that the economy is creating, and it is a cat and mouse. The economy is always going to be faster developing than the policies, and that is because of lags, right? We have the biggest issue is lag, to where it just takes a year to vote in a law, and then it takes another year or two to get that law rolling. So even though we know that there's an economic problem causing an environmental or political issue, the political atmosphere might take 3 years to actually get the solution started, and that is a huge problem. And then you have just general bureaucracy, right? There might be a very specific issue happening inside of a community, and they go to their local congressman or congresswoman or political advisor or political team, and they go in and they say, hey, my water is unclean, or hey, this AQI is really bad, or hey, I don't have easy access to dumping my toxic waste, right? And the congressman just doesn't care, or the bureaucracy makes it really hard for the congressman or political advisor to actually see what's going on. Like kind of what we saw with Flint, Michigan, to where everyone was saying the water's disgusting, you can't drink this water, I'm taking a shower in it and my hair's falling out, and then we find out years later that it was actually just a company dumping their toxic waste into their drinking water for them to save a few bucks. Right? It's a horrible perspective, but that's just the reality of what we have with these economic developments, is that the business is always going to be leading the problem, and it's the job of the political atmosphere to correct those wrongs, essentially, is what we're getting to. And the end result is that these governments have to balance their budgets and trying to understand that you can't fix everything at once. Obviously, we can't snap our fingers and go away from fossil fuels. If we could, I think some countries would. The problem is that developing enough solar power or enough wind power or enough hydropower, it takes a lot of time, and it's also really hard. Storing the electricity is the hardest part. To store electricity takes a lot of money and a lot of space. So what about nuclear? Well, then you have this political and social issues of nuclear. Do we trust the nuclear because of Chernobyl and all of those fun things? It just, the government can't snap their fingers because they have only a certain amount of money. So what ends up happening is that we're looking at the world to try to solve each other's problems. So again, back to this liberalization policies, things like that. If you reduce the tariffs, if you increase the domestic industries, if you're trying to protect it from these bad proponents of the economy, this all comes in this very complex difficult answer to a solution that we must find, right? We must find a solution to these environmental degradations, and the end result is that each country has their own difficulty, whether that be lack of money, lack of time, lack of location, space, or lack of desire, right? America is just a lack of desire. They have enough deserts for solar power. They have enough farmland for wind turbines. They definitely have the money to invest in nuclear energy. They just choose not to, right? So that's the difficult part, is that this process to finding a solution to these economic issues is sometimes just not feasible day in, day out. And that's the sad part, right? All right, everybody. I hope you guys can understand the industrialization dependence on fossil fuels and leading to a problem inside the environment. And that is overall the aspect you guys need to know about this section of the class. Okay? Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later.